Hi, my name is Shikha Nayar. I am 31. I'm a scientist. I know that means a lot of different things to a lot of people, but for me right now it means working at a biotech company where we are trying to use big data, machine learning, immunology to uncover new targets for autoimmune diseases and cancers. And I grew up originally in Hong Kong and moved to the States originally for undergrad, but I've been here now for like 13 years.
That's crazy. I didn't know
Yeah.
that little snippet.
Yeah.
No, that's so cool. Like, what was that like? Having to kind of uproot yourself from everything that you've known and do it all by yourself.
Yeah, I mean, so what was really great, I think, growing up was the ability for us to travel a lot. And so my parents always really prioritized making sure that my sister and I were exposed to different cultures and experiences. And actually, going to an international school in Hong Kong, most of my friends went to university in either the UK or the States.
Mm-hmm.
Some like stayed in Hong Kong, and some went to other places too, but that was the majority. And I had two cousins who I was really, really close to growing up, who were like my brother and sister,
Mm-hmm.
who already were in New York.
Oh, cool.
And so they were studying here. My mom's brother is in New Jersey, so I had been here a few times.
Mm-hmm.
But I moved to Durham, North Carolina for college to go to Duke, and it was, completely different from Hong Kong.
Right.
And so, but I will say, like, the population at Duke is so diverse and, you know, all these different backgrounds that I feel like everyone was in the same boat in a way. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, some people had more adjustment than others, but
Yeah.
it was honestly a really cool way to bring together my upbringing into a new environment, but also still keep exposing myself to other cultures and backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. And what are some activities or different things that you did to ground yourself
Mhm.
when maybe it was overwhelming being in a new place?
Yeah. So I went to college for like biology being my major,
Mm-hmm.
but I actually, one of the reasons I decided to go to college in the States versus the UK was the ability to also do music as a minor
Mm-hmm.
and have that balance and expose myself to things that weren't just like me, delving into science all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that balance has always been something that was important to me. I'd always had extracurriculars and other things growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think making sure that I found a community when I initially moved, whether that be through a hobby or whether that be through music or through my classes or through my dorm or whatever it was, making sure that I cultivated that early was really important.
Yeah.
And like finding people who I could connect to.
Mm-hmm.
And then also realizing that I think when you realize you're not the only one in this situation, you
Yeah.
feel like more people are in the same boat and you can connect even if you're not necessarily best friends. So obviously at the beginning, like you're not going to know everyone.
Right.
And that takes time to cultivate relationships. But um, having like similar interests, finding people who had maybe similar, not necessarily, you know, backgrounds, but who had the same values and thought the same way. I think was really beneficial, and also knowing a couple of other people from Hong Kong who went to Duke was
Oh,
helpful.
that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
how did those experiences prep you for where you are now?
yeah. I mean, pretty huge. So after graduating from undergrad, I moved to New York. So I've been here for almost 9 years, I think. And it's really become, like my home, my adult home.
Mm-hmm.
Even though my parents are still in Hong Kong and I go visit them,
Mm-hmm.
I'm lucky to have a lot of family here, see my niece and nephew grow up. But I think to your point, like having all of those experiences when I was younger, when I first moved here, really set me up to continue to be open
Mm-hmm.
and continue to like be interested and fascinated by different things about the world and about communities that I was living in. And so when I was applying for jobs and like getting settled in New York, and originally, had a good amount of friends and family here, but like trying to find my own rhythm.
Right. Yeah.
I think having those experiences of, it's not the end of the world. Like, you're in a new place, you're in a new environment, a new situation, but you can make it work because you've done it before, and you know that you have the support of family and friends to do that.
And what's some advice, kind of going off that you could give to somebody who maybe is trying to move to a new place or is trying to find their footing?
Yeah. I mean, this sounds kind of cheesy, but like, we are, at the end of the day, all citizens of the same planet, and I think oftentimes we get so embedded and like mentally embedded in the one or two communities that we've always been a part of. And so, of course, change is scary, and I think everyone should embrace the unknowns of that. I don't think you should completely ignore it.
Yeah.
But I think knowing that when you move somewhere else, or when you're trying to start something new, that you have other maybe mentors or people to follow by example, and like what has worked for other people might not necessarily work for you, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
And so I think the biggest thing is being patient and kind with yourself to actually cultivate a community and a support network, and not even just people, but also the places that make you who you are in a new place. I think being patient to find those things is really valuable, because eventually that will help you when you have those bad days and the setbacks. So I think being patient, but also being intentional with thinking about how you go about that.
Yeah. And what has been like your biggest source of inspiration in your life?
Oh, huge question. Oh boy. I think I'm really grateful to have such a supportive family and like close friend network. And I think seeing different people, especially like starting with women in STEM. So starting with people who are role models in my specific work career field, and how they've navigated personal life, things like motherhood and being a woman in such a male dominated initially career path, and how you can really embrace your uniqueness and like get you far. And that has been really inspirational on the career front. And I have been really lucky to have a few mentors who are women in STEM, and who really just have been so wonderful and so supportive, and a cheerleader when your family and friends are always going to be supportive, but they don't necessarily know the challenges and the specifics of your career field. And so having people who can advocate for you and really be examples for how you might want to lead has been really wonderful. And I think the second thing is honestly seeing how people like my parents, people like my aunts and uncles who have had ups and downs in their lives and have still really supported and provided such a nurturing relationship for their kids. That has been really, really inspirational to me. And I think especially as one grows older and your relationship with your parents starts to change a little bit, and you become less of a kid and more as like develop this human relationship with them. I think that has been really empowering for me going into my 30s and thinking about the different life events and changes I might come across, and also imagining maybe my parents at these different stages in their lives and how they interact with me now, I think is really different to when I was younger.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think about that probably a little too often. It's like, oh my God, my parents were like
they're human.
23 and 24 when they had me.
Yeah.
Like, they were parents of a like 2 or 3 year old at the age that I'm at now, and that just like blows my mind to think that Like, I don't think I would trust myself with a child right now. I'm like, oh my
But
God.
you know, at the same time, when you have no other option,
Yeah.
that's like it's what you do. You like pull up your bootstraps and figure it out. Yeah.
It's just like so wild to think of, you know, your parents at this younger age and potentially going through a lot of these things of like, what am I going to do with my career? What am I, or realizing that, you know, even parents, they don't always know what they're doing.
Yeah,
like when you're younger,
totally.
you think, oh my God, they are like the most all-knowing people ever.
Yeah.
And then you also become an adult and you're like,
actually, no one really has the answer. Yeah.
So I assume you do a lot of reading, especially with what you went to school for. You had to do a lot of reading. Are there any like books or any other music or anything that you recommend to people?
Great question. I mean, let me think. I think I have phases with books where I get into historical fiction as one of my favorite genres, and I think part of it is because it transports me to another time that I know is like in part embedded in what actually happened in our, you know, world's history, but also that it takes the liberties to transport you to a fantastical world.
Yeah.
I feel like the recommendations I would give are just mainly superficial based on what I have been reading most recently.
Yeah.
But I will say one of the most powerful books I've read recently was Circe. And it just had all the elements of an adventure, of a powerful female figure, of the way that gender norms have infiltrated our society, even though this was, you know, thinking of like mythology. And it was a really powerful book that stuck with me. Let me think. Similarly, I mean, Hamnet, which is a book by Maggie O'Farrell, was really wonderful in a similar historical fiction way, in that it was about Shakespeare's wife and son, and really her role in society, how she was perceived, and how she really like her character development and her inner emotions. And I think it was really powerful. I also just learned that Chloe Zhao, who is a director of Nomadland, is making an adaptation of Hamnet, which I'm really excited for because I think she'll do a really good job.
Gotta read that book real quick.
Yeah. And then music. I listen to a lot of different music. So I have different times of day when I like listening to different things, and I honestly listen to a lot of podcasts, so it's like embedded in that. I love listening to certain classical music with like hip hop beats when I'm working. It's like a really good way to calm me, but also like raise the energy in a subtle way. I'm trying to think of. I think Spotify does actually a really good job of their algorithm and how it recommends one thing based on your previous listening history. Always love, you know, again, like indie women singers. I think some of their music is a really good example of how we channel all of our complex emotions in this time that we're living into music. And I think that's really powerful. Yeah. Those are very big, but you know, some of the things that I enjoy and think about. Jazz, love jazz.
Love jazz.
Love listening to live jazz. Want to do more of that this summer. I know we did that this past weekend, which was really nice.
Yes.
With our choir friends.
I know. If you ever need a jazz buddy, I am that person.
Awesome.
Do you have any podcasts that you recommend since you mentioned that?
Yeah. So I listen to a bunch of different podcasts. A lot of them are either like pop culture related or political related. There are a few that really stand out to me that are also about just like how we think about the world. One of them is 99% Invisible, which is a design podcast, but in a way that it takes certain elements in your life that you might not think about. It's like how did the lock come about, or like these different park benches, like just these certain topics that are really fascinating, and you learn a cool history about how this thing that you use every day originally started. And I think it's a really cool way to explore things. Slate's Cultural Gab Fest is one of my favorite like cultural podcasts I listen to. Usually on my commute to choir on Wednesdays, which is really nice. Let me think. And then there's, a couple of like interview style podcasts. Always love Terry Gross. Yeah, I think those are the ones that come to me right now.
And if this is like a random question, but if you could have any kind of like medium that doesn't already exist, what would you choose? And that could be like a style of music that maybe you don't really hear often, or a type of podcast, or like what would you like to see more of in the world?
Oh, I love that. I really like, so there was actually one podcast, I believe it was called That Classical Podcast or something like that. And they took a classical composer and pulled out personal history and made it like so funny and relatable. And you felt like you knew Chopin, or like you felt, it was just like so cool. And unfortunately they had to stop producing. But more things that I think combine certain interests of mine. So whether it's like science, music, like yoga, fitness, whatever it is, and like put a spin on it or put some kind of twist on it. I think that really engages me in ways that that maybe the traditional podcast is like becoming a little more habitual.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess to just wrap things up, if there's any other like advice or things that you recommend to people that you think that like maybe a lesson that you've learned that is super important that you want to share with others.
Yeah, I think, I felt lucky that I've been in general a self-assured and emotionally stable person for most of my life. But I will say that I think one of the most important lessons I've learned, especially the last few years with all of the turmoils and also high moments that I've had, but also the world has faced. I think the one thing is like really taking the time to feel your emotions, and dismissing them only buries them further, and they're going to surface another way. And that might not necessarily be a natural tendency if you are used to being able to process things as they come and just kind of move through the next one. But I think if there is really something that both good and bad emotions, taking the time to like sit with it, really think about how it makes you feel, sharing it with people who you might be comfortable with, maybe seeing their perspective on it, and then having like the full cycle to reflect on it before moving on. Because I think eventually that will really help to frame future situations that might make you feel a certain way. And you can pull from a fully formed response to it as opposed to like a partial knee-jerk reaction. So sit with your emotions. It's healthy. It's, feel all the feels.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for letting me chat
thank
with
you. This is so wonderful you're doing this.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I'm very much enjoying just learning about other people. If nothing else, like I am loving talking to people. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Megan.